Hey, this is Representative Evan Goyke. It's been a little while since we brought you a Nerd Power video, and a lot of our time and attention has rightly been focused on COVID-19 and the state and federal responses to COVID-19. But I'm coming to you today with a video that is not about COVID. It's an issue that's been going on for a number of years in my community, and then there's some interesting legal and political twists and turns. So today's video is the whole story, the true story behind a lawsuit against a company called Vision Property Management, and then a whole bunch of different limited liability companies that are affiliates or subsidiaries of Vision Property Management. And the lawsuit is the state of Wisconsin. The Department of Justice is suing Vision Property Management for a number of different types of deceitful and unlawful business practices. And this is what it's really about. It's really about, at the end of the day, this American dream of home ownership and the power of home ownership and quality houses and affordable houses. And how that can matter to a neighborhood, a block, and then the broader city and state. So Vision Property Management and their affiliate companies are not from here. They're from South Carolina, and there's kind of this pyramid or Ponzi scheme of companies that work together, and they're all kind of shrouded in these different limited liability companies. Now, back in 2016, in the city of Green Bay, local investigatory journalists started looking at lease-to-own or rent-to-own practices. And they uncovered a number of different stories, really heartbreaking stories of people that thought that they were achieving the American dream. They thought they were building equity by eventually buying a house through this rent-to-own process. But it turned out that the people that they bought from, Vision Property Management and their affiliates, had a whole bunch of different violations and deceitful practices. What was really going on, the kind of summary is that a number of these houses weren't fit for human habitation, or that there were problems with the property, conditions that weren't reported to the buyer, or back taxes or liens against the property that weren't reported to the buyer. And those are all violations of consumer protection laws. Vision Property Management had a legal duty to disclose what they knew, and they did not do that. And so people went into these purchases and they didn't have all the facts, and so they bought properties that then had a lot of problems. One example here from the city of Green Bay. Vision Property Management and its affiliates had a lease agreement to a property that had a raise order. It was scheduled to be torn down because of all the problems in the house. And this was unlawful. You can see here in the story, it was unlawful for the company to seek to lease this property out. And the city of Green Bay thought it was, should be torn down. The raise order was issued, yet this company was leasing and renting it out. In Milwaukee, the problems kind of exploded. You can see here a story from 2018 where Kaja Holdings 2 LLC, so again, one of those subsidiary LLCs under Vision Property Management, they're kind of all interconnected. They actually tried to evict this gentleman in the story here, even though that company no longer owned the house. They had actually lost the house because the company was not paying property taxes on the house that they owned. So they lost the house in tax foreclosure, yet they still had the gall, and you can see the quote from Alderman Bob Bauman there, they still had the gall to then file an eviction lawsuit and try to evict the gentleman who was trying to lease and then own this property. And that's after this guy put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and money into this property because, like many people, he wanted a forever home or an opportunity to put roots down, to build equity, to reach that American dream. So Green Bay, Milwaukee, all over the state, the Department of Justice took over this lawsuit a few years ago under then Republican Attorney General Brad Schimmel. And they initiated the lawsuit, and the defendants, the companies, had their lawyers, and the case took a while kind of to drag out. So as we're about to finish 2018, there was an election in November, and Attorney General Josh Kaul was elected. A few weeks later, as you recall, the Republican legislature convened what's called the lame duck session, and they changed the law on how cases in which the state of Wisconsin is a party can get settled. So under Schimmel, the Department of Justice had the power to negotiate a settlement with Vision Property Management and just kind of execute it without delay. Under the lame duck law, this all changed. And what has happened because of that lame duck law is there's been a huge delay and backlog in settling these cases. And the reason why there's a backlog and confusion and delay is because the lame duck law is written so poorly and the procedure has not been worked out by legislative Republicans that there's this impasse. The Department of Justice can't communicate to the legislatures, like me, all of the details of what's going on, and you've got confidentiality problems and lawsuits and other lawyers and judges involved, and so it's a total mess. So what has happened now, what's going on right now, 4 years after this lawsuit was investigated and initiated, is the Department of Justice and Vision Property Management have reached tentative agreement on a settlement of these of this lawsuit. And so the Department of Justice a few weeks ago sent the members of the Joint Committee on Finance a memo outlining the terms of the settlement. And it involves the companies paying a number of different fines and fees and forfeitures. And most important to me, it requires them to pay $350,000 in restitution to the victims of their actions. That means the gentleman that you saw in the news article who they tried to evict unlawfully, that person would be able to get restitution for the ways they were wronged. And that means a lot. What it also means for the broader communities that have been affected is it means clarity in who owns these properties and a path forward. I want to share a little bit about why I care about this case so much. Pictured now is a yard in the Martin Drive neighborhood in the 18th Assembly District on Milwaukee's west side. This property has been a nuisance for neighbors for years. It's kind of acted as a kind of an unofficial junkyard in violation of a number of different city ordinances. And the city has tried their best to enforce the ordinances, but they have a company that owns the property that's unresponsive, and that's a company that's in this lawsuit. And so finishing this lawsuit, getting that company out, getting a new owner in, will bring a lot of relief to the neighbors. They've been working for years to try to address these different nuisances. Now it even hits closer to home for me. There is a property on my block, just 6 houses down from my house, that is also owned by Vision Property Management or one of their affiliates. So the other day, before I filmed this video, I went down the street and I took some pictures of the house. And so what you're seeing here is a house just down the street from me on West State Street. You can see the condition of the house and boarded up windows. You can see that there's trash in the yard that hasn't been picked up. You can see that the front window has been broken with glass all over the porch and it hasn't been secured. And you can see a note on the door which Vision is required to put up there with contact information if there are problems. And that sheet of paper is blank with no contact information. And this is the type of incredibly frustrating or infuriating behavior that happens far too often, and it prevents neighbors, those of us on this block that are trying really hard, putting money into our houses, really trying to stabilize the neighborhood. And when you have one house like this that sits empty and has unresponsive corporate owners from out of state, it becomes very hard to make progress. And that one property that becomes an eyesore can reduce the value of all of the properties around it, and then that then makes it hard for us to invest money back because our values are going down, and it is a very serious domino effect, and I can attest to it personally because this house is a problem. It's on my block and it affects me directly, and you can see that, you can imagine that seeing these pictures, what it's like, and to have an unresponsive owner that won't fix up and clean up their properties. So on May 12th, the Department of Justice sent a memo to the members of the Joint Committee on Finance saying they were ready to settle 4 lawsuits, one of them being the state of Wisconsin versus Vision Property Management. I've outlined a little bit of the terms of the settlement. I am in favor of this because it brings restitution to the victims and certainty to those of us in the communities affected. I wish that these people would have to pay more or that there would even be criminal charges, but what we really need is we need resolution. We need finality. We need to be able to get these properties into the hands of good owners and move forward. So I've written a letter, and you can see some of that here, to the co-chairpersons of the Joint Committee on Finance, Representative Nygren and Senator Darling, asking them to convene the committee and to approve this lawsuit. Under the lame duck law, it is required that the Joint Committee on Finance take an affirmative action to approve this settlement. They can't just ignore it. If they ignore it, it doesn't get settled, and that means further delay. What the lame duck laws have done and are doing now is delaying resolution of this case, and the only people that benefit from delay of this case are those corporate out-of-state owners that are allowed to let properties like the ones you've seen continue to deteriorate and the neighbors around them continue to grow frustrated and to suffer. So this needs action now. The lame duck doesn't work. I've never supported it. I don't think that it can actually work in practice, but we need to approve this settlement because it is very consequential to a number of neighborhoods throughout the state, and we need to get this done, bring relief to the victims. So this letter was sent. I'm calling on the co-chairs of Joint Finance, and I wanted to do this video so that you could see a real-world, tangible example of how the lame duck legislation has negatively impacted communities in the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if it was their intent or not to cause delay in litigation like this, but that's the real world implication of the lame duck. We are now waiting for resolution because of partisan political games that were played in the lame duck session. No attorney general ever in the history of the state of Wisconsin had to come before the Joint Committee on Finance to approve a lawsuit like this. Brad Schimmel didn't have to come before the committee to settle this lawsuit when he started it. But now, because Josh Kaul's a Democrat and he won statewide, and Tony Evers was elected as a Democratic governor statewide, the Republicans changed the law and are requiring those state office holders to jump through hoops. And those jumps and those hoops cause delay, and that causes problems on blocks like mine. So it's time to move forward with this lawsuit, and the whole lame duck framework and legislation ought to be thrown out. And this is an example of how and why it doesn't work. So I'm sorry that it was so long. Lots of interesting twists and turns, but it's a real-world results and consequences for the delay because of the lame duck law. So hopefully my next update will be that the Vision Property Management lawsuit has been settled. There's finality, there's restitution to victims, and we're moving forward. Thank you.